Ready to go,
All right,
legendary handicapper Marc Lawrence.
there we go.
Okay,
Uh,
so Mark back from being treated like a superstar out in Las Vegas, as he should be, as we talk college football. We've already talked college football. Actually, we did two 2 hour plus previews a couple of weeks ago before your trip. Now I know why you needed a trip.
yes.
So now we're ready to go. The season begins on Saturday. We got some silly games. How many games actually are on Saturday?
Oh, there are 9 line games. There are other games that are involving FCS schools, but 9 games amongst FBS teams. So, pretty good start for a small weekend of college football.
Yeah, and that's called week zero.
Week zero,
Yes, yeah, week
exactly.
zero. All right. So, and don't forget, everybody, next week we're going to have a couple of shows that we're going to record and post on this channel. One show is going to be our NFL season preview. Ryan Dunleavy is scheduled to join us from the New York Post. Of course, Ryan was with us last year towards the end of the season when we did with the three of us and the playoffs and the Super Bowl and all that. So we're bringing that trio back for the season preview for the NFL next week. And we're also going to start our week one college football picks and analysis. That'll be a separate show that Mark and I will do next week as well. So that's going to be coming up next week right here. So don't forget, comment section. Let us know what you think about any of our predictions. We're going to go through each conference quickly. We're going to talk about our predictions. That's it. If you want to find out about the teams or detailed analysis, you can check out the videos that we just told you about, the 2.5 hour video. So we got a bunch of we have all 10 conferences and the independents previewed on the channel, so you can check them out in depth, previews and analysis. But this is about predictions. So let's get started, Mark, with the MAC. So we'll go from what is considered now the weakest conference in college football in the FBS. And let's start with, I'll tell you what, I'll start with, and I mentioned I might do this, and this is going to be one of my surprises. I'm going to go ahead and take Bowling Green. I'm going to, because I think the East in the MAC is just kind of weak. Especially Miami of Ohio seems to be the best team, but they lost a lot of key guys on defense. And even though they bring Gabbert back at quarterback, I just really like the direction Bowling Green's going. I like their quarterback, and I think this is the year that they break through. So I'm going to take Bowling Green against Northern Illinois, the defending champs, and I'm just going to roll with the Falcons to win it all.
Wow, I was going to ask you, was Bowling Green going to be your pick to win the championship or your sleeper pick?
Yeah,
But
both.
you identified them as both. Exactly
Yes.
right. That's a big, long sleeper pick, and I can understand why. I mean, this team is loaded. I mean, absolutely loaded with returning experience. The Falcons are this football season. They will be a player inside the MAC conference, but if you ask me now, who I see as being the champion of the conference, I don't know if I can go out on that same ledge as you're going out on. I got to be a little bit more conservative here and back the Red Hawks of Miami of Ohio. They're a football team, as we talked about in our preview here, that I really, really like their head coach, Chuck Martin. They've got 15 starters back, 9 on offense. A lot of good things about them. And remember, he inherited a winless team in 2013, and we're talking about him being in a championship game this year. So I'm going to make Miami of Ohio my team to win the championship with my sleeper playing your other team, the same as your other team, Northern Illinois, football champion last year, who comes back well stocked again this football season here. Wouldn't surprise me at all to see Northern Illinois battling for or possibly winning the MAC championship.
Yeah, I was kind of, it was, to me, it was Toledo, Northern Illinois. I think it's going to be a real tough battle between those two teams because Toledo had a pretty good team last year.
Yes.
They even played Notre Dame tough. They had a good team, but they just, I don't, they just can't kind of, in my opinion, I don't know. The coach has done a good job, Candle, but he's not Matt Campbell. He's not that coach, I think, to get them over the hump and win these big games. That's what I'm concerned about the most. So they always seem to kind of lose a game that kind of derails their opportunity to win the big prize overall. But I still think this is a good chance for them to do that. They got a nice, young, exciting quarterback to keep an eye on. And a couple of other sleepers, I'd probably look at Eastern Michigan and Ohio. I think Ohio's going to come back a little bit. Last year was terrible with Solich leaving at the last minute. So I think they're going to be better again. And Eastern Michigan, I mean, how can you not like them, especially as a handicapping team? Creighton does a great job in the dog roll and all that kind of stuff. So those would be a couple other sleepers. Who do you have as a sleeper? Do you have like an official sleeper, or do you have a couple of sleepers in the MAC?
Well, I would look at Central Michigan. I'm a big fan, I should say, of Jim McElwain. I think he does a great job with that program here. And the other Michigan from the other side of the state, the western side, Western Michigan, Tim Lester has done a nice job with this football program. He's had him bowling 3 of the last 4 years. So those would be my two other sleepers. And one quick comment here about Toledo, as you mentioned. One reason that I left them home this year is last year they were the #1 team in college football in regards to returning experience. And even though they really didn't capitalize on that. They're not as well stocked this year as they were last year, and they were a bit disappointing, as you mentioned, last year. So that's the reason I'm leaving them home.
All right. And by the way, Hammock did a great job because they were winless that COVID season. What, they were like 0-6, and then had the big year last year, winning it all. And they've got the quarterback kid back, Rocky Lombardi, the Michigan
Yes,
State
yeah,
transfer.
exactly.
So that's a big deal. Okay, so that's the MAC. Now let's talk about Conference USA, and I'm going to be kind of boring as far as defending champion because we talked about them from the beginning of the season all the way through to the end of the season. They came through and won it all, and they've got a lot of guys coming back again. I know they lose their running back. I know they lose one of their key linebackers, but pretty much everybody else is back. So I'm taking Texas San Antonio to repeat. And the other division is just, I mean, not division because but the other team is so hard. There's so many possibilities. I think it's wide open as can be, but I'm going to take Florida Atlantic.
Okay.
I still think they have the talent. I think this is a Taggart. I don't think he's a bad coach. I think there's been a lot of turmoil, a lot of traveling, a lot of things going on in his head the last few years. So maybe a couple of years of stability there now, and they still have a really good quarterback for this conference. So and a couple other good players. So I'm going to go ahead and take FAU, but it could be a bunch of other teams. So that's my championship: Texas San Antonio and FAU, with Texas San Antonio repeating.
Well, I could say I'm riding on your coattails, or you could say you're riding on my coattails because I'm with you on Texas San Antonio. I'm a huge Jim
Yeah, we
Trail.
both were last year. Yeah.
Exactly right. He's that high school legend coach of Texas who will be coaching, you can mark this down, at a Power Five conference, likely next year, especially if they end up winning the conference again this football season here. And the reason I think that they will win the conference this year is a lot of the tools are in place that were there last year, led by their outstanding quarterback, Grayson McCall. Nothing negative about this football team that I see. They improved their
Are you talking
offense.
about Frank Harris?
Yes, I'm sorry, Frank Harris. Yes. Uh, they improved their offense and their defense both ways last football season. And with all the returning advantages of players they have, 8 starters back on offense, including, as you mentioned, Harris, the quarterback, I got to put them squarely on top. Now, my sleeper team in the conference is I'm going to go back to an oldie but goodie, if you will. And an oldie but goodie is a team that maybe 10 years ago was knocking at the door year after year after year in this conference, and that's North Texas, the
Okay.
Mean Green football team. And I think they're going to have themselves a football season this year here as well. I'm a big fan of the Mean Green. I like all the returning experience they've got coming back this football season. And you also take a look at their makeup. They're inside the state of Texas, so they get a lot of the recruits that what they would call scraps per se.
Yeah.
That the Big 12 decided to pass on. Well, guess what? They head to Denton, Texas, is where they head. And Seth Luttrell, we talked about him so many times in the past. He was on that cusp of going to a Power Five conference before he laid a 4-win season back in 2020 and a 4-win season in 2019. 2019 is probably more the reason that he ended up losing glamour, if you will, with the ADs at the Power Five conferences, because the 2020 season, we can throw that out
Sure.
because of COVID. But he did bounce back last football season. He took his team to a bowl game. And like I say, with 8 starters back on offense, I make the Mean Green playing UTSA for the conference championship.
All right. And then sleepers, I think it's 5 of them. For me, I can go. And first of all, let's talk about UAB because neither one of us have them in there. And it was not easy for me to not put them in there because they're still a very talented team. But we all know the coach is gone, and that's a loss. But maybe one season they could still rally around the coach, so that's still possible, definitely. So I'm not discounting UAB. I think they're going to be there. But the other teams, UTEP, again, as I said before, I think they're going to be good just like last year. I just don't know if they've got enough of that talent offensively to compare with some of these other top teams. Western Kentucky should be real interesting. They got that kid from Division II, the quarterback transferring in. That could be very exciting. Middle Tennessee, they get their quarterback healthy again. They were dangerous when he was before he got hurt, so they're interesting. And a team that I think may finally get back to a bowl. I think it's time, and that's Rice. So I'm gonna say Rice has a chance for a bowl, but that's it. Not sniffing a conference championship. But I think UAB, UTEP, Western Kentucky, Middle Tennessee State, and your North Texas, all of them could definitely play in the championship game.
Well, this is anybody gets there to that championship game that's not UTSA would not be a surprise because it is rather wide open behind them. And as you mentioned, UAB had Bill Clark not decided to step down, they would have been the logical co-choice in this conference here. But remember, a lot of the players that stock this roster are the players that Bill Clark brought into the program. So talent-wise, they're going to be right there. And in fact, who knows if they don't dedicate the season to Bill Clark? And
Yeah.
if they do, that's a big push for this football program. So I cannot dismiss them. I got to make them the number 3 team inside this conference.
And I also shouldn't forget Charlotte because of the fact that they've
Yeah.
got talent on offense, they got a veteran quarterback, they've got exciting receiver weapons. The problem is a little bit problem on defense, and they just under Healy they haven't been able to win road games. And if you can't win big road games, you can't win the conference.
No, but they did sneak up toward bowl eligibility last year. They won 5 football games before they really bottomed out. They lost 5 of their final 6 games of the season. They're going to have to remedy that, obviously. But they got out to that good start last football season here. And if they can get out to a good start here once again, this could be the year that they break on through to the other side.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me to designate an actual sleeper because obviously UAB's not. You can't say UTEP's a sleeper. You can't say Western Kentucky's a sleeper. I don't even know if North Texas is a sleeper because of, like you said, they're actually used to being at the top. It's only been a couple of years. Maybe you could say North Texas is a sleeper. So I guess if I had to designate a true sleeper, it might be either Charlotte or Middle Tennessee State. So I'll put Middle Tennessee State as like my legitimate sleeper in the conference. But again, it's kind of hard to actually find a true sleeper. What do you think? Do you have like a sleeper?
Well, my sleeper was North Texas, simply because
Yeah, that's good.
they
That'll
were
work.
plus 2,000. UTSA, you can take them plus 210. North Texas, you can get plus 2,000. That's money enough for me to get
Okay.
my attention. 6 wins for their over/under season win total. I think they go over that total, and getting over that total, I think, gets them closer to playing in the conference championship game.
Now let's talk about the Sun Belt. And the Sun Belt seems to be getting better every season, which is nice. Not sure how this is going to work out with all the changing of the conferences and alignment, but right now it's at an all-time high. And you mentioned a quarterback by the name of Grayson McCall, and we talked about this during the Sun Belt that Sun Belt talk that even though it's obvious that Coastal's losing a lot of players, I just think that there's something about the program right now with the combination of the coach and the quarterback that I just think that they're building something really special there. I don't see this as a fluke, like it's going to go away completely when McCall leaves. Maybe they won't be as dangerous until they find another decent quarterback. But I love McCall. I mean, I have him in my top 4 already for the NFL draft. I'm a little bit more excited about him than most people. I think most people have him like maybe like a top 7 quarterback in the draft. I just love him so much that I think he's going to go higher than that. So I'm going to take Coastal Carolina to win a very tough East. We talked about this East. I mean, I think 4 or 5 teams in the East can beat the top team from the West in the Sun Belt. So I'll take Coastal Carolina and Troy in the Sun Belt Championship.
Well, I'm going to take Coastal Carolina and Troy in the
Oh,
Sun Belt Conference
all
Championship.
right.
We're thinking exactly alike here. You mentioned the Coastal Carolina story with Grayson McCall. The big reason that they are where they are is Jamie Chadwell, their head coach.
Yes.
just look at what his recruiting rankings have been here. You go back to 2019, they were ranked 121st in the country in recruiting rankings. That was out of 130 teams. Then they went to 99. Then they went to 81. This year they go to 70. You can see where the migration's going. He's recruiting all get out at this football program here, and it's going to continue to perpetuate even after this football season if Chadwell is still there. If they have another 11-win season,
Yeah.
by the way, this team's been ranked 21 straight weeks in a row. That's a real tip of the hat to what the job that Chadwell has done with this football program here. I don't see them slipping up this football season here. And with Troy as well, only because I don't feel that there's a lot of other teams inside the Sun Belt that
That's weak.
I think
The
are
West.
serious challenges. Exactly right. You got to kind of like look for the best of the rest, if you will. And I think that could well end up being Troy this football season here. New head coach John Sumrall comes in to take over this football program here. He's going to take over for Chip Lindsey, the former head coach here. But he does have some tools to work with. 18 starters back, including his quarterback coming back. And they've been knocking on the door 3 years in a row. 5 wins, 5 wins, 5 wins. They get to that sixth win, they'll be celebratory. Believe me, in Troy and going to a bowl game this year, I've got to make them my sleeper pick in this conference.
Now, keep in mind, though, too, and this is, I haven't, I don't know if anything's been official yet, but Daggy transferred to Troy recently. So so that's even a bigger plus because you bring back your returning starting quarterback from last year, and you get a quarterback that has put up big numbers in the Power Five, and he's going to come to Troy. So it's a good situation either way at quarterback for Troy. And I just think Louisiana, they just lost so much. You lose your coach, you took everybody with them. I just think it's going to be tough to repeat. So.
Other than the fact that, again, we'll use that same adage that the coach recruited the players that are a lot still there. So there will be some talent there. I just don't think they'll have the direction and the fire that they had before the big coaching change was made.
Okay, next up, sleepers. I think all the sleepers are going to come from the East. So I'm going to say top two sleepers would be Georgia State and Old Dominion. Those are the two top sleepers. Maybe Arkansas State could be a sleeper in the West because they were so bad last year, and Butch Jones has had another year there. Maybe they're the West sleepers, but I'll take Georgia State or Old Dominion as East sleepers.
I'm with you on Georgia State. Deshaun Elliott, a real good head coach, solid head coach. Took them bowling last football season with 8 wins. He brings 15 starters back. I've got to make them the sleeper. Troy would have been my sleeper, but they're also my second best team, so you can't keep writing the second best team as a sleeper.
No.
That being the case, I'll cast my vote for Georgia State being the conference leader this year.
All right, so next up, Mountain West Conference. And for the Mountain, with Utah State pulling that big surprise last year, we spoke glowingly of the job that Anderson did. It was a remarkable job, but he loses just too much, especially with Boise brings everybody back. And the coach is in his second year. So I'm going to stick with Boise. No surprise there. And no surprise in the West either. I'm going to kind of go chalk here and take Fresno State and Boise State.
I'm with you exactly. I think you have to. Those are the two logical choices. Boise and Fresno State each. Jeff Tedford, in the 4th year of his second term with this football program, all the guy does is win games. 10 wins last football season here. And again, another football team with 15 starters back. It bodes real well for them. And I think Boise is going to have a bit of a breakout season this year. And kind of maybe a stretch to say that because we're talking about Boise, but the Boise program has been down largely of late here. Since Chris Peterson left it really began going south. But I think this football season here can put them back on the map. They've got a lot going on there. Andy Avalo showed a lot to me last football season here. Yes, they won 7 games. They went bowling, but they closed out the season winning 4 of their last 5 games, 4 regular season, or 4 of their 5 last games. But they did not go bowling because of the COVID situation. But that's a nice way to close out the season with momentum just like that. They improved offensively and defensively. I think Boise State is also going to be in the mix in this conference this year as well.
Yeah, and then you take a look at I mean, I don't know, something about Air Force. It just always seems like whenever they're predicted to play really well, they don't, and when they're predicted to struggle, they play well. It's a very strange, weird dynamic at Air Force. But good program. Coach has been there for a long time, done a great job. I just can't buy into the beating Boise State this year, but who knows? Maybe if they get off to a good start and it looks like they're the real deal. They did win some big games last year that nobody thought they'd win. So, you got to keep an eye on Air Force too. I think Colorado State and New Mexico and UNLV. Those would be my sleeper teams, only that New Mexico and UNLV will be just sleeper to get to a bowl. And Colorado State would be my sleeper overall. I can't make San Jose State a sleeper because they just won a couple of years ago. I still think San Jose State's going to be tough to beat. I think they're going to be in second behind Fresno with San Diego State hanging around as always. But I'll take Colorado State as my top overall sleeper to win the conference.
Well, I'm going to take a sleeper team here, Greg, that I'm going to make you guess who the sleeper team is going to be. They're a team last year that improved almost 100 yards a game on the defensive side of the football, and they improved dramatically over 100, 140 yards on offense last season in football. And they're not expected to be that same type of a team this football season. Who am I talking about?
The Mountain West. Wow.
Well, I'll give you a hint.
And it's not a team that I talked about?
Yes, it is a team.
Oh, it is a team I talked. Well, then I'll say, if it's a team I said, I'll say UNLV?
No, that's who you started the conversation with, Utah State.
Wow, you're back.
Yep.
Okay, I like that.
I'm going to circle back with them. Blake Anderson, a terrific head coach. I think he's the most unsung head coach in the group of 5 college football coaches that are still out there right now. He's proven himself everywhere he's been. Set school records last year, went from 1 win to 11 wins in a football season here with all those dramatic improvements statistically. He's got 12 starters back, 7 on offense here. He's not going to be barefoot naked this football season here.
Sure.
Yes, I know he'll be amongst the hunted because of what he did last football season. But if they don't approach him that way, as if he's just a non-contender, there could be a price to be paid here. I think Blake Anderson outcoaches most coaches in this conference. I make them the sleeper.
I didn't think of Utah State because they're defending champs.
That's correct.
Yeah, but most people don't expect them to win this year.
No, but the thing of it is you're going to get plus 1,000 on this football team.
There you go.
Yeah. So for that reason, I categorize them as a sleeper.
All right, and as you said, and we know how the quarterback position is so important in football. You bring your quarterback back, even though he loses a lot of weapons, he's still back, and that's big. Okay, now let's talk about the final team in the group of 5, and that is the final league, and that is the AAC, and of course Cincinnati defending champ. I'm not going to, when I look at this division, it's really tough. I mean, conference. It's really tough because there's you're not going to have 2 divisions, so it's the top 2 teams. I'm going to take Cincinnati to get back to the championship, but I'm going to go ahead and say UCF wins the championship. I just think coach, there's still talent, obviously, but they just lost too many superstars, in my opinion. And Gus Malzahn's a really good coach. We talked about it in the preview of the AAC. So I'll take Central Florida to beat Cincinnati in the championship.
Okay, I'm going to take Central Florida in the championship game to beat what would have been my sleeper, and I'll find another sleeper between now as we close this segment out, but that's going to be the East Carolina Pirates. This is a football I think is going to make some noise this football season here. And I'm going to say so much noise as far to go to put them in the conference championship game.
I like it.
Yes, they made big jumps offensively and defensively last year. Mike Houston's done a real rock-solid job with this football program here. His recruiting numbers keep getting better and better and better. 15 starters back, 7 on offense with the quarterback here. I got to like this football team this year. Look at what they did last year, Greg. They closed out the season with 4 wins in their last 5 football games. I really like that. They would have gone bowling. Again, COVID came came calling. They had 7 wins and they were denied a bowl bid. I think that'll also be extra incentive for East Carolina this football season.
Yeah, I made some good money on East Carolina last year, so I believe in them. They're definitely one of my sleepers, and the other sleeper is the easy one because we talked about them also, and that's South Florida. So South Florida, obviously East Carolina has been winning more the last couple of years than South Florida. South Florida has been on the bottom for a little bit, but I still think South Florida has the talent, especially if they get that improved quarterback play, to be there in the mix for the championship. So I'll take East Carolina, South Florida as the official sleepers. And like I said, I got Central Florida winning it over Cincinnati. Now, do you have Central Florida winning it over East Carolina?
I would have to do that right now because,
Okay.
they would be the obvious favorite in the football game, where they play game one. But a lot depends upon the momentum and how teams go into that football game. So I would say yes. I would say East Carolina gets there but doesn't win the championship.
Yeah, let's see. Just going back to, because I don't even think I asked you about those. Yeah. I don't know why I keep forgetting that. That's important. We did the first one. Actually, I did the first one. I forgot to even ask you these questions or ask me these questions. So, who do you have winning the MAC?
I'm going to have Miami of Ohio winning the map.
Okay.
They're the football team that I mentioned before. I love their coach. I love everything that's going on there, and I think they played Northern Illinois, and I don't think it's 2 in a row for Northern. I'll make Miami the conference champion.
All right. And again, I said Texas San Antonio will repeat. You had North Texas against the Roadrunners. Who do you have winning it?
UTSA
Okay.
to repeat.
And then in the Sun Belt, we both had Coastal Carolina and Troy. I'm assuming we're both going Coastal.
Coastal it is. Coastal. Yes.
Okay. And in the Mountain West, Boise Fresno. We both have Boise Fresno. I'm taking Boise. Who are you taking?
I'm going Boise here as well. I hate being so chalky.
Well,
But,
that's why we have the sleepers.
That's exactly right.
And Cincinnati, Central Florida. I have Central Florida, and you have Central Florida as well.
Exactly.
All right, that's the group of five. By the way, out of those group of fives, who do you like the most? Is there a team out of the group of where Cincinnati busted through and became a playoff team? Do you think any of these teams have what it takes to hang around and be a potential playoff team this year?
Well, I would think the obvious choices would be UTSA, possibly Coastal Carolina, maybe Boise State. I put them in that order: 1, 2, 3.
UTSA, Coastal,
Yes, in Boise.
and Boise. Wow, I like that. Okay, because I had Coastal fourth. Texas San Antonio was actually sixth, and Boise was first. I have Boise, Central Florida, Cincinnati, Coastal, Fresno, and UTSA was on the outside of my top five. But if you had a top three, Boise, Central Florida, Cincinnati. But I just, as much as I love Coastal, I don't know if they have enough weapons outside of Grayson to be the best of the group of five. But I hope so. I think that'd be a great story to see Coastal Carolina sniffing a playoff berth with that quarterback. Okay.
But we're going to get to later as we close out the show about a party crasher, and I'll mention who that party crasher is as we close out the show.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Now let's go. Yeah, so that'll be an official playoff party crasher. By the way, do you have this on any of your newsletters?
Newsletters.
I mean, your weekly newsletter?
No, the weekly newsletter is out right now, the preseason edition. It only had the write-ups for the first weekend of games this weekend, week 0, and then we'll get into the next round of football games. So as we get to these teams that we're talking about here, we'll likely call them out in the newsletter as such.
Let's start the Power 5 with the Pac-12. And I'm going to let you start. Tell me who you like in the Power 5 conferences first. Who do you have playing in the championship game in the Pac-12?
I do not have Southern Cal. Okay, everybody's got Southern Cal. I was just out in Vegas. Everybody from California is coming out and betting Southern Cal with both fists. They made them the favorite right now, forgetting that they were a 4-win team.
Yeah.
I mean, they're delusional. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah,
they're going to be a nice football team. They'll be improved, but champion, I don't think so. The team I've got is the team that won the championship last year, the Utah Utes,
I agree.
a football team that is, I think, head and shoulders the best team inside this conference. Hard to dismiss and hard to back a team to win back-to-back championships. But the things that Utah did last year, they earned them. Okay, they did just that. They got 14 starters coming back here. I know everybody's going to want a piece of this football team, but I think everybody's going to want more a piece of Southern Cal personally than everybody else. But the key to me, Greg, is this: that if you take a look at what they did the job with last year, they got the championship wrapped up by playing more underclassmen than any team in the country last year.
Awesome.
That bodes well for football teams the next year. You're coming back talented, experienced, and anxious and hungry. So I'm going to make Utah my team to win the Pac-12 championship again this year.
And who were they beating?
Well, I'm going to put them a little bit chalky in a sense here because I think there's only 4 teams in this conference that have a real legitimate chance of playing, and I think one of those might be the Oregon Ducks this football season here.
Okay.
I know Mario Cristobal is gone. Dan Lanning comes in here. I think he'll do a respectable job. He's a good defensive head coach, and he's put a pretty good offensive, as I understand, assistant staff around him. And that's going to be key and critical for this football program because you can't win Pac-12 games by not scoring enough points and holding other teams down. You have to do things successfully here. But I do like what they got going on. I like Bo Nix. I think he's getting a born-again chance with a football program like them, being put back in the spotlight. He put up some big numbers at Auburn. He also had some bad Rocky games, but I think it's time for him to relight the scoreboard, if you will. So Oregon, I think, will battle in this championship game against Utah.
Okay, well, like I said, I'm agreeing with you with Utah. I'm going to have them win it all as well. But this is going to be one of my few sleeper surprises, and I'm taking the team that you know how much I like them, Oregon State.
Yes.
I think this is the perfect year for them to do it. That's because you get as great as a hiring it appears Oregon's made. There's a lot of excitement there, and I completely agree with all of that. He's still a first-year head coach. So first year, you got Jonathan Smith. He's been with the program already for a few years. They're going up the ladder, and now they get their quarterback back. They got most of their defensive key players are back. They get to host Oregon the last game of the season. I think it all points to if Oregon State is going to beat Oregon and Washington and the like in this division and win it, this would be the perfect year for them to do it. So that's why I'm taking Oregon State. And as far as sleepers, obviously Oregon State would qualify, but non-Oregon State sleepers for me would probably, I'm probably going to go with Stanford and Washington State because Stanford, you got their quarterback back. There's a lot of players coming back, and they've got to improve, don't they? I mean, you just get the feeling that sooner or later Stanford's going to go back to playing winning football. So I think this could be that year. And then we both talked about the possibility of Washington State being an intriguing team to keep an eye on as a sleeper as well. So those would be my other 2 sleepers outside of Oregon State. What about you?
Well, let me say this. I think trying to find the primary reason for this fall at Stanford here, and it's been dramatic of late here, really, really uncharacteristic of David Shaw. And I think what's gotten to this football team is a lot of what affected or has affected the likes of Northwestern here of late, Vanderbilt forever. And it's because of the high academic standards of the school here. I think it's catching up with them. I don't think they're recruiting the type of ball players that are competitive enough inside the Pac-12. And I think David Shaw just simply cannot overcome that with smart athletes. He's got to have talented athletes. So that's my little commentary on Stanford.
Okay.
As far as my sleepers go, we both agree on Washington State. And I think there's a lot going on there right now that people don't realize. And the coaching change, I think, is going to be much, much beneficial for this football program this year. And the other guy I'm going to give you is a guy that people are going to say, "Are you kidding?" I mean, I read where Aaron Rodgers is on mushrooms. Are you on mushrooms? No, I've never been on mushrooms. I'll never be on mushrooms. But I'm going to use Arizona. The Wildcats is my sleeper team.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they've won all of 1 game in the last 2 years, okay? But it's Jed Fish who's their head coach. And look at the job Jed Fish did last year in that 1-win season. He improved his defense 103 yards a game. The offense was only 14 yards off of what it was from the team that he inherited. And they finished dead last in college football in net turnover margin last year. You know what happens to stuff like that, Greg? What goes up usually goes down and vice versa. These teams that finish so low in turnover margins, they almost always get back to even or plus, and if they do that, Arizona will be a surprise team this year, and hence I have to make them a sleeper.
Yeah, I mean, Arizona is definitely a non-divisions, one of my top non-division sleepers, like some of the others I talked about. Whereas Stanford and Washington State, I think, have the sleeper chance to win the division. But yeah, I'm totally on board because last year I came so close, and I still think this year it's going to pay off. We talked about this, and I'm going to keep talking about it all year about how in college football you have to pick a few 15, 18-point dogs every week, and hopefully you get the right ones. And I was just hammering Arizona almost every week.
Yes, you were.
This is going to be the week. This is going to be the week. And they kept coming close every time, and they couldn't pull it off. But they came close. They lost to Utah by 9. They lost to USC by 7. They lost to Washington by 5. And they lost to BYU by 8. Those are all teams that they were double-digit dogs to, that they were in those games. So that just shows you that they're going to start closing those games out this year. The odds are going to come down a little bit, but maybe early in the season at San Diego State, week 1, that's a double-digit underdog, isn't it?
And it's the wrong double-digit underdog, I believe. San Diego State is really kind of waning backwards, and I think Arizona's on the uptick here. I think that's a solid double-digit take.
What do you think the line to be in that game?
I think we're going to see San Diego State 12.
Yeah, it's about right. Okay,
Right.
That's what I thought. Okay, well, hopefully, I mean, that's the thing. Got to take advantage of it early, because if they win one of those games early, then you're not going to get so lucky with the odds. They'll be coming down. Okay, now let's stick with the group. The Power 5, and we'll talk Big 12. So, who do you like to play in the Big 12 championship? No divisions. So, which are the top 2 teams?
My top 2 teams, I'm going to put Texas on top in this conference.
Oh,
yeah, there we go.
Backing Mr.
Sarkisian.
Mr.
Okay?
Sarkisian, yes.
Yes, just provided that he's not too over well oiled up for his football games. I know he had some drinking problems. I'm pretty sure he's past those, but he's also under a lot of pressure here right now at Texas. He's done a great job in the offseason recruiting, which means players are being attracted once again to this football program here. But there's a thing that I always talk about, Greg. It's called mission dogs. And mission dogs are simply teams that had a losing season last year, and they were bowlers each of the previous 3 seasons. Well, Texas fits that role to the epitome of being a mission dog this football season here. All the flack they took for their 5-win season last year, including that unbelievable loss to Kansas.
Yeah.
What were they, a 34 5-point dog in that football game?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
They lose the game straight up. My goodness. I think that this football team has a good chance. They're gonna open up with 3 in a row at home. Alabama, one of those football teams. They're not likely to beat Alabama, but I think they're going to play them closer than what the odds makers are going to anticipate here.
That's a good measuring stick game. Even if they don't win, you want to see them competitive in the second half.
Exactly, and if they come out of that game competitively, I think it'll bolster their morale for this football program here. And you look at their road games. They're at Texas Tech. That's winnable. They'll be favored there. They go to Oklahoma State. That game will be winnable. They'll probably be a small dog, 3-point dog. They go to Kansas State. They'll be the favorite. They go to Kansas. They'll be a good favorite, and with a lot of revenge, obviously, in a game like that. So their chances on the road of outperforming what they did last year, I think, are excellent. All they need to do is take care of business at home.
Yeah.
And I'll put Texas in the championship game.
Well, how about if Jeff Traylor and Texas San Antonio upsets Texas at Texas? Is Jeff Traylor the head coach at Texas next year?
That would be a strong possibility.
Yeah, right?
Yes, it would be. It would be a real strong possibility. Obviously, the wheels would have to fall off the cart for Texas completely this year.
Yeah.
But
that kind of loss could do it. Even though Texas San Antonio is still a good program, but you can't be losing to those games if you're Texas.
Well, let's take it one step further. Let's go backwards. What if Texas upends Alabama, and they come into the San Antonio game most likely flat as a pancake?
Yes.
And then get taken out.
Yeah,
okay?
That's a little different. Yeah.
That's a little different. Exactly right. So it depends upon the circumstance in that UTSA game.
Who's Texas playing?
I've got Texas playing Kansas State, my sleeper team.
Hey, that's it. We're thinking alike.
There we go. Yeah, as you know, I
Chris
like the.
Kleinman, baby.
I'm sorry.
Chris Kleinman.
I'm a huge Chris Kleiman fan.
Yes.
Huge, 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 huge. He does that. And I'll just tell you a little sidebar note here. In my trip to Vegas, I ran into Kelly Stewart. She's a very, very popular host. She's with Barstool Sports. She's with Wager Talk Media, and she hosts a lot of TV shows and whatnot. She's a very, very astute, knowledgeable handicapper. They think because she's a woman, she can't be, but she is. She's very, very astute. Well, she's a graduate from Kansas State.
Okay.
I learned that. Okay. I learned that. And I also know a couple of kids that played quarterback for Kansas State, the Coughlin brothers. I happen to know them personally as well. So I'm getting inundated with Kansas State
Vibes.
info, if you will. Exactly.
Yeah.
About what this football program is going to be all about this year here. And they're going to bring in 5 Division I transfers coming into this football program. Adrian Martinez is going to take over at quarterback.
That's a big one.
I know he had his ups and downs, but he had a lot of ups there in that football program.
Yep. And look at the winning that Kleiman did when he had. I mean, because the quarterback, who was the quarterback last year again? That guy who could never stay healthy.
Oh, Skylar Thompson.
Yes, good quarterback, and they were very competitive when he played. I mean, he was a quarterback, right, when they upset Oklahoma a couple of times.
He's going to be in the Miami Dolphin roster this year. Yes.
So competitive, but he couldn't stay healthy. So the backup was had to be one of the worst FBS starters last year in the last couple of years. They just had bad backup quarterback, and they still were able to win games. So just imagine if Adrian Martinez comes in here and stays healthy, how much of a difference he'll make. Throw in the fact you have Deuce Vaughn at running back and Malik Knowles at wide receiver.
And remember, Greg, last year they switched their defense from a 4-man front to a 3-man front, and they improved 100 yards a game. That's really, really strong for a football program, having all that confidence coming back here. They also improved their offense as well. I think this football program's got a real strong chance of stealing this conference.
Yeah, the major issue I'm having is going to be, which is why I'm not going to think of anything crazy, and I think they're number 2 in my opinion, and maybe you too, is just their schedule, because they have some really tough road games, and they're a very tough home team. They could pull off tons of upsets at home, but now they're going to have to be asked to do that on the road. So I think that's going to make things a little tough. But they got one chance, I believe, with Adrian Martinez. I don't think he has another year after this. I get so confused with how that works nowadays, but. If this is it for Adrian Martinez, you want to try to strike rich as you can. Same thing when you have Deuce Vaughn in the backfield and some of these other players. So if they're going to do it, this would be a really good year for them to do it. Who do you have winning it?
Well, I'm going to go to Kansas State. I'm going to call for the upset in the championship game. Texas. If Texas makes it there, they'll feel elated having just accomplished that fact, and I think Kansas State will be the hungrier of the 2 football teams.
All right, I see where you're coming from, because I think the hard part's going to be getting there.
Yes.
But I think if they're there, they're going to be so dangerous, especially since my pick is going to be Baylor, and they're the defending champs. So maybe, it's hard to win back-to-back. I'm sticking with Baylor, and maybe even more so because I still think it's going to be hard for Kansas State with that schedule to make it to the championship game, even though I have them in the championship game. I just feel a little bit safer pick just going with Baylor to win it all. And I think Rhonda's doing a great job there, and everybody's talking about Oklahoma, and just like they are with USC. And the reason being is, they get Dylan Gabriel transferring in, which is nice. They lost a lot of key players to USC. Venables should make that defense very good. But first year, again, we talked about this before. You got a first-year head coach. Here's a coach, Aranda, who's been there for a few years, and he's done such a great job already. And he has this really good young quarterback coming back. So I think Baylor is going to be tough to beat. I think this is going to be a really tough program to beat as long as Dave Aranda is coaching there.
Well, Baylor's going to have to go into Norman and beat Oklahoma. I think, to make that all happen, which they can do. And the reason I'm sort of down on Oklahoma this year is not so much Lincoln Riley being gone. It's the fact that if you put their offense under a microscope, you see that they've slipped mightily 3 years in a row. Their offense has. And now you're bringing in a defensive head coach to take over the program here.
Yeah.
I just don't know if they're going to have enough offensive motor, to be the Oklahoma Sooner that we've known in the past.
Yeah, the good thing is that not only do you bring Gabriel in, but Gabriel knows the coach that's running the offense,
Correct.
so
That's a
that
real
helps.
point. Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, look, and I believe that this is. I don't think this is going to be, 10-1 Oklahoma, Baylor, and 9-2 or 10-1 Kansas State. I think these teams are going to beat up each other. I think there's going to be a couple of losses on both championship teams. I just think there's so much competition at the top, and even talking about teams like if you're talking about sleepers, because you have teams, because Kansas State's obviously a sleeper. I think Iowa State's a definite sleeper. I think this is definitely where Matt Campbell does his best. You like Texas Tech, I know, as a potential sleeper. We talked about West Virginia being dangerous. So, Kansas is going to get even better. So I think this is going to be very tough to have a really dominant team in this conference.
I believe so. There's no team I think that's going to be a stick out that wins it, and you're going to go, "Oh my, what happened?" And there won't be no favorite that loses, and you say, "My goodness, what happened to that team?" Because I think it's rather wide open.
I have Kansas State. We both have Kansas State, so we're going to wipe them off the board. Iowa State becomes my official sleeper. Who would you be your official sleeper if it's not Kansas State?
That's a tough question, like you mentioned, because there's so many football teams inside this conference here. Uh, Probably maybe Oklahoma State. And it's not so much that they're a sleeper. It's just, if for no other reason, the fact that we haven't talked about them.
Yeah.
And a lot of other people could be passing a team like that over here. I know Mike Gundy is a little bit peeved at what's happened in the offseason, and he's also does a great job recruiting. He recruits as well as any coach in that conference here. 29th overall in the country. So I would probably make them my other sleeper. Yes.
No, it's a good one because let's remember they did not win the Big 12 because they lost it at the last second.
Yes.
Basically, their backup running back wasn't fast enough to hit the pylon, which would have sent them to the playoffs.
Right.
And their quarterback threw like 3 or 4 interceptions in the championship game, and he's the first team Big 12 quarterback, Spencer Sanders. So. And he comes back, by the way. So they get the first team Big 12 quarterback returning, and they have the best defensive line in the conference. They got tons of talent on the defensive line. So that's a good pick as a sleeper because nobody's anticipating that they're going to return to the championship game this year. Let's talk about the ACC. And this is interesting because last year we had Pitt and Wake Forest in the championship game.
Wow.
Unfortunately, Hartman, have you heard whether or not they're – you know what the problem is yet?
I haven't heard an inkling of anything that's going on since they announced that he was out, and I don't know for sure even why he's out. It hasn't really been explained to anybody why it is. So they're going to go as far as his situation goes at Wake Forest, unquestionably.
All right, so Pickett's gone. They're still going to be good because Slovis comes in. They do lose Addison, the Blitnikoff winner, but Narduzzi. He usually has a pretty decent defense, so they're going to try to win back-to-back, and you got Clemson. And Clemson, is it going to be Mr. Ukulele, the quarterback? Or are they going to go to the freshman phenom? If you can get one bad game at a DJ, and you're going to go, enough of that. A matter of fact, I'm going to be interviewing Phil Kornblut, who is voice of South Carolina Sports Talk, in the next week to preview the Clemson season. So that's going to be available here on the channel. We'll talk all about that quarterback battle. But are you going with Clemson to return to dominance and reclaim the ACC or not?
Well, I have to, Greg, if for no other reason that in a poll of all of our playbook experts, we asked everybody before the season, who is your sleeper college football team this year? And my sleeper college football team was Clemson. You say, Clemson, my goodness, they're a Mount Rushmore football team. Well, yes, perhaps they are, but they weren't last year. And if for no other reason, it's my way of acknowledging a big bounce back is in order for Clemson this football season here. Everybody forgets the fact that their defense improved.
It was huge defense,
84 yards a game last football. And their offense improved last year as well. So the dramatic fall that they had, well, I should say their offense improved. It was their defense. It was all about the defense with the football program. But I have to make them the team to beat here. I think Dabo's going to have fire in his eyes this football season.
And who are they beating?
I have them beating NC State.
No, they're playing in the same division. No, who are they beating in the championship?
Well, beating out NC State.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, that's my team. I'm actually taking NC State to beat Clemson in the Atlantic.
Oh,
So
really?
I'm taking it. They're going to be my sleeper playoff team because of that. I just think all the signs are just like I said with Oregon State to an extent, uh, and maybe Kansas State. That you got to pick the year, and I think this is the perfect year that if NC State's going to make that move, this is the year they have to try and do it. Um,
Well,
that's how talented I think they are.
well, they are my sleeper pick, NC State at plus 750, but the team they'll beat will most likely be Miami of Florida.
Yeah, I agree. I have them too.
Yep. Mario Cristobal's ready. He got his charges all ready here. He's doing a lot of great things down here. Tyler Van Dyke might end up being a first round draft pick in the NFL football draft next year, might be the best quarterback in the ACC this year as well. A lot to like about Miami this football season, so I got Miami taking on Clemson.
All right, and I'm going to have NC State and Clemson. So again, you have a Leary, who, if my pick goes, you're going to have probably the two best quarterbacks in the conference, Leary and Van Dyke, going up against each other. But I also like about NC State is uh, they've got their offensive line, even though they lost a key guy, is still going to be solid. They have Leary at quarterback throwing to a couple of receivers that nobody probably pays attention to because Emezi was there for so long, but they're still talented. They'll make their name. And then the defensive side is really where Leary's done such a great job in recruiting over the years. And he's going to bring back a really good defense. I mean, you talk about that linebacking unit with Drake Thomas and Peyton Wilson is going to be fantastic. They got to keep Wilson healthy. That's the one thing. That poor kid has had so many injuries. He's like Frankenstein by now. But if he stays healthy, I think that's going to be all the difference that NC State needs to maybe pull it all off. And finally, because again, it wasn't NC State who won last year. It was Wake Forest. So I'll take NC State and Miami. I'll take NC State to win it all. And will you go with Clemson or Miami?
I'm going to go with Clemson, if for no other reason. Those defensive stats, the stats I told you before, were not Clemson stats. Clemson only allowed 308 yards a game last season. I have to correct myself. But word I'm hearing is Dabo Swinney insists this will be the best defense he's ever had in his career at Clemson this football season coming up.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm a little bit not sure about is that quarterback spot. And unless this kid comes out, DJ, and plays well, okay, then the offense plays well. We know the defense is going to be awesome. Then they'll go back to being the old Clemson. But I got to kind of see that too. But who knows? Maybe the freshman quarterback comes in and becomes a star overnight. That's why I don't think Clemson's going away anytime soon as a powerhouse. And I think they're 10-1 to win the national championship. So that's not a bad idea. Okay. Sleeper, you said NC State. I'm going to take, I think there's a few possibilities. I think you could go with Louisville. I think you could actually go with Boston College too. But I'm going to say Florida State. I love the way they ended the season last season. I think Norval, I know there was, it felt like his job was on the line, and maybe it was there. It was kind of iffy, but they did a great job at the end of the season, and I think he's going to get the job done there. So I just think it's way too tough of a division. We talked about the Sun Belt, same thing in a way. You got Miami and maybe Pitt. I think Pitt will be fine, but we got Miami, Pitt, and then it's a huge kind of drop off. But the Atlantic, you got Clemson, NC State, Florida State, Louisville, Boston College, and Wake Forest if Hartman's healthy. That is a very tough division.
Very, very tough division. I think this conference is really, really going to improve this football season. As you mentioned, it starts with NC State and their improvement. Clemson's going to be an improved football team as well. Florida State is going to be that team. Mike Norvell might have the sleeper team inside this conference here. They're on the precipice right now of being just that. But I just can't pass up NC State plus 750. I'm not going to say they're going to upend Clemson, but I think they're going to be right down to who scores last in a championship game.
All right, now let's go to the Big Ten. And in the East, you have Michigan defending their division and championship for the first time under Harbaugh. But even I'm a Michigan fan. I just think it's just a bad year because you have a quarterback in C.J. Stroud who could be the first pick of the draft, and that would be warranted. He's got an offense that is just I don't know if there's a better offense in college football. And I think their defense is going to have to be better when you hire Jim Knowles. You know they're going to be better. So I just think they're too dangerous. They get Michigan at home, so they'll win the East. And then I'll let you close it out on who you like in the East and the West.
Well, I'm going to run with you with Ohio State for obvious reasons. You know, arguably, I think it's a coin flip between them and Alabama for the superiority in college football this year. And the hire of Knowles, as you sent as their defensive coordinator, I think, is that extra edge the Buckeyes are going to enjoy this football season. I have to run with Wisconsin in the other division here. If for no other reason, they've been there, they've done that, their experience, and I think the division is weak, the other division. But I'm going to throw a sleeper out there to keep an eye on this football season here that I think is going to make a lot of noise, and people are going to say, "Where on earth did this football team come from?"
Is that going to be my pick to win the division?
Don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay.
Because if it did, that'd take a lot of stones to do just that. But
well, I'm not picking Wisconsin.
No. Well, yeah, no. I would think.
I think it's between. To me, I think it's between. And look, if Wisconsin doesn't win it, I think it's between. I'm going to say Nebraska and Minnesota, but I'm actually taking Nebraska.
There you go. There you go. That's who I was going to give you, and that's who you came with. I think that's the football team that makes the most noise in the Big Ten Conference this football season here. They've been knocking on the door. He was given this contract extension, this illusionary contract extension for reasons that between him and the university they know all about. But beside all that, my goodness, look at what happened to this football program last year, Greg. They lost 9 games, and I believe if you take a look at them,
all of them by single digits.
By single digits, all 9 by single digits. I mean, you know that stuff turns around in a quick hurry. And when he lost 9 games last year, unbelievably, his offense was 57 yards a game better, and his defense was 21 yards a game better. You have to scratch your head and wonder what happened. Well, what happened was they lost those close call football games. You got a head coach here, if you will, that wants to obviously stay here. You know, he's the hero from Nebraska when he played there at college. 7 starters back on offense here. I think Nebraska scares the death out of Wisconsin in that division.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too is and look, we're not going to know until the game, which is probably the game of the week, the Nebraska Northwestern game, and it's not because of where they're playing, but it's because of the fact that I would even put Northwestern as a sleeper because we don't know, and we never know what Pat Fitzgerald is going to do at Northwestern, and he surprises everybody every couple of years, and they're a division championship contender. So I still think Northwestern's a legitimate sleeper. But Nebraska, there's been talk, and I interviewed Steve Marek, who covers the Huskers. And that's available, obviously, on our channel. But we talked about, and he said that he's been hearing rumblings about they're doing something different scheme-wise on the offensive line. He doesn't really know what that is. And he was saying that they're talking more about we're going to dictate terms instead of the other way around. What I gathered from that, I was just guessing, but what I gathered from that is, and I hope it's truth, is that they're going to go back to playing smash mouth football at Nebraska. Do what you do best. Stop this spread zone crap. I know he was successful at Oregon and Central Florida. But weren't we all kind of surprised? Even though we got the job, it was a surprise. But we were like, wow, he's going to bring this really like high up-tempo offense to Nebraska? That's going to take a while, isn't it? That's going to be weird. Well, it hasn't been successful. So I hope for their sake that that's what they're doing. I hope they're going back to, because maybe he learned a lesson from Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Hey, look what Harbaugh did last year. He went back to the basics. He went back. He gave up the spread. He went back to doing what he knows best. I hope that's the case for Nebraska. But either way, no matter what their scheme is, not just the close losses turn into wins, but they do have talent. They've got talent coming back on defense. And they got, even though Martinez is gone, they got a quarterback that also has experience playing pretty good for Texas last year. Yeah, and in a division that is winnable.
I agree on all counts. I think they check a lot of boxes this football season here, and there's a lot of value to the team here. Plus 2,200, if you will, in the Big Ten to win the Big Ten championship. That's a pretty attractive take for me.
That is. And then the other sleeper teams, like I said, well, Minnesota's, I think, to win the division, because if I wasn't taking Nebraska, I would take Minnesota. We know what PJ Fluck can do there. He gets Morgan back, quarterback. I hope the running back, the kid Ibrahim, can stay healthy because he's a really good running back. They've got weapon at wide receiver, a weapon at tight end. Defensively, I think they're going to be okay, even though they've lost some players there. But I think they're going to be good. That look, the reason I think this is a good year to win it, if you're one of those marginal teams in the last few years, is because Wisconsin loses a ton of players on defense, some really superstar type players, and I will not believe that Graham Mertz is going to be a competent quarterback until he proves it on the football field. I mean, he is the most overrated quarterback in all of college football since he's come out, and he's yet to prove it. And I'm hearing again in the offseason, oh, this is the year. This is Graham Mertz's year. I don't want to hear it. All right, just do it. Show me who are they playing the first week. They're playing Illinois State. I don't even care if it's Illinois State. Throw for 400 yards. Show me that you're going to actually do something, because week 2, you're playing Washington State at home. They have cupcakes mostly, but that Washington State game might not be that easy, as we talked about. Washington State could be interesting, but they got to go to Ohio State on September 24th. So we'll know right away at the end of the month whether Mertz is the real deal or not.
Well, my choice for Wisconsin in this division is largely by default because
Yeah.
I don't
I
think
know they won. I know it's like look at them last year with Mertz. Even though Iowa won it, I mean they could have won the division with as bad as Mertz played.
yeah, he was terrible. I mean, they haven't thrown for 200 yards a game average for 2 years running now. So, and don't be surprised if if he starts out sluggish here in these first 3 games at home, if they don't pull a switcheroo when they go to Ohio State on the 24th.
Well, I hope they have somebody, because that's the other thing. He's been there for like what? This is going to be 3 years. They
Yes.
don't have somebody else on the roster for
Well,
3 years.
you would think for sure that they do. But again, they'll use that person if Mertz ends up being the Mertz of old.
And again, and look, they could lose the Ohio State game and still win their division because it's a non-division game. That's kind of the way Wisconsin has handled things recently. Okay, so and then, like I said, I know you don't believe in Illinois. I'm going to still call them a sleeper team because I think they're going to have a good year, a bowl type season. But I think that whole division could be pretty interesting. And I think in the East, Michigan State is potentially a sleeper. I'd keep an eye on them. I know they lose Walker, but the quarterback's back, the receiver's back, and so far so good at Michigan State the first couple of years. Their head coach has done a nice job, whether it's transfers or recruiting. And so I think they could be an interesting type potential sleeper. But we both have Ohio State winning the Big Ten, correct?
Correct. And I would make Purdue a sleeper
Oh,
in that division. Okay, it's a
okay.
challenge, if you will, to challenge Wisconsin. Don't give up. They're a very, very well coached team. Jeff Brom, and last year they won 9 football games behind an offense that was improved 49 yards a game, a defense that improved 33 yards a football game, and they bring those 15 starters back. Like I say, he's in just about every game that he plays. And if you look up and down his schedule here this football season here, I'm looking to see, and I don't, yeah, it's October 22nd when they go to Wisconsin. So he's going to come off of a trek of 3 tough games: home to Nebraska, at Wisconsin, home to Iowa. That will be determined Purdue's football season this year.
All right. And yeah, Aiden O'Connell is at least he's on. He might even be the top quarterback in the division.
He might be, yes.
And Penn State, you don't believe in James Franklin?
I think he's a counterfeit $3 bill. Okay, I don't like the guy. Not even close. I don't. I think he's
Sort of like Sarkeesian.
I think better than Sarkisian. I mean, worse than
Yeah.
Sarkisian.
Oh, wait. Okay.
I think this guy, he wins isolated games, big football games, and he gets contract extensions. That's all that the guy does. He's won 11 games the past two football seasons here running. Uh, Everybody makes him out to be this quality coach who came from Vanderbilt, who excelled at Penn State. I don't see anything excelling at Penn State here. Just not a big James Franklin
Yeah,
fan.
and if you look at it, the thing that's really been holding them back is they don't have any good offensive linemen anymore. They can't run the football anymore. That's the thing and they still play good defense, but it's like where's the old Penn State? They used to be able to have great offensive line with great running, and I just don't see it anymore. So, all right, SEC, and this is where the defending champs are. This is where Alabama is. Are we seeing is this going to be an easy peasy Georgia Alabama matchup?
Well, easy peasy Alabama somebody matchup, yes.
Oh.
Okay. What number one? Georgia's going to be a targeted football team, defending national champions.
Yes.
They were just devoured in the draft on the defensive side of the football, and there's a lot of holes they have to fill for a defending national champion. So everybody will be coming at the Georgia Bulldogs this football season here. Uh, I'd probably be surprised if they don't make that title game, but I think there's other teams inside this conference here that will give them a run, if you will. And one of those guys is a team that's led by a coach who I disdain, but nonetheless, as far as sleepers in this SEC goes, I got to put Ole Miss as a sleeper. Not so much because they're in the West Division with Alabama to challenge there, but uh, behind Georgia, I think it's kind of wide open. But again, I feel that they're going to be targeted, and I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia barely wins their division, the East Division.
Okay. So, but you're going to have Georgia Alabama.
I'm going to have Georgia, Alabama, yes,
Okay. And Alabama wins it.
and Alabama wins it. I had Georgia making the playoff as a number three team. So how could they not? How could they not make the playoffs if they don't win their division?
Yeah, I'm gonna have them same thing, and like you said, I think there's a lot of good sleepers in the SEC. I think this would be a very good SEC season. I think, and we know it's always a tough conference, of course, but there have been a lot of bad teams in recent years, or a lot of average teams. They don't really have a chance against the big boys. But I think this year, I mean, with Rattler going to South Carolina, we know they're going to be better. We know Tennessee's improving big time. Heupel's there and Hendon Hooker's there. You know, they're going to be a tough one of those tough teams you talked about that could upend Georgia,
Exactly.
um, make it interesting for the division. And then in the other division, you said Kiffin and Ole Miss. You got Mississippi State, and they're bringing another year under Leach, and you got Rogers, very efficient quarterback. You've got Arkansas is going to be good again. Texas A&M's dangerous, beat Alabama last year, and then besides Tennessee is my number one sleeper. But the other sleeper for me, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit on our SEC preview, is LSU. I'm just gonna. I kind of like where LSU is right now. They're like 90-1 to win the national championship. I just think Brian Kelly. You put a coach that knows what he's doing with the talent that they have at quarterback too. That's better than what they've had. I just think LSU is a really legitimate sleeper, but it's just such a tough. It's like Alabama, and then you've got these 5 or 6 teams, and even if you want to throw Auburn in there, all battling with each other, it's just going to be so hard for whoever finishes in second. I think is pot luck.
It is potluck, but I agree with what you're saying here. I got to make Tennessee the team that's going to, I think, breathe down Georgia's neck inside the East here. You take a look at the makeup of this football program this year. Offense really exploded last year, 140 yards a game, better than they were, 17 points a game, better than they were. 8 of those starters are back on that offense for Tennessee this football season. And you look at their schedule here, their first 6 games of the year, they take on only one team that had a winning record last year. So if they get out to this good start that they're expected to do, they could go into or host Alabama, but maybe perhaps arguably lofty, a 5-0 record doing just that. They have to beat LSU at LSU, and that would be quite an upset. But nonetheless, I think that the way the schedule breaks out for them, soft early, tough late, I think it makes Tennessee a contender in the SEC East.
All right, it's time to go over our rankings. All right, and I already know we have the same top three because you've already identified it, and I'm the same. So we're both going to go with Alabama 1, Ohio State 2, and Georgia 3.
And Georgia 3, correct.
Okay. Now, where do we deviate? Because this is going to be the beginning of our deviation. Because, and I think it's going to be only based on one decision. And I think it's going to be who wins the ACC. Because I have NC State 4. Do you have Clemson 4?
I absolutely have Clemson 4, yes.
All right. Now, 5.
5 is tough.
5, yes, 5 is tough. I decided, and this may look, because they're not conferences, we weren't going to really talk too much about it today, but let's keep in mind I did an interview with Kyle Kelly, who covers the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. That's available on the channel. I'm going to preview Utah football tomorrow with a writer from the Salt Lake Tribune, so that'll be available. And BYU is also going to be available on Saturday. So it's Notre Dame's already up there, BYU, the other independents on Saturday, and Utah, my pick for number 5, is going to be on tomorrow's interview on the channel tomorrow. So, but as far as Notre Dame and BYU, the only thing is I just think the schedule. Plus Notre Dame's got a young quarterback. I think that might cost them a game, and an inexperienced head coach. So I think because of that, I think Notre Dame is probably a 2 or 3 loss team, which is going to knock them out of 5. BYU is also going to be very good, but they have a murderous schedule, BYU. So I just think that it's kind of hard to even put BYU there. But I think they're both going to be very competitive. I couldn't put them, especially Notre Dame. I just couldn't put Notre Dame at number 5.
I understand why. I mean, like you mentioned, the new coach has never been a head coach before, all those things. But the team I'm going to put at number 5 is a team we haven't even mentioned, hasn't whispered about. Not that I think that they're even going to win their division, but I think they're only going to have one loss in the season, and they're led by a head coach who's been there 4 years, and in those 4 years, he has ranked number 4, number 6, number 8, and number 1 in
Oh,
college football recruiting the last 4 years.
Texas A&M.
Absolutely. Those numbers I'm throwing out there for a reason, okay? Those are the type of numbers that Georgia had put up, Alabama had put up, Ohio State had put up in the probably the last 10 years. Top 10 ranked recruiting classes, and Texas A&M is doing just that. And it comes to fruition here in the 5th year because now you got 4 years of recruiting classes that rank 6 or better in the country, or I should say top 10, and number 8 or better, but top 10 recruiting classes. I think the only loss A&M will incur this year is when they go to Alabama and get their fanny handed to them on October 8th.
Okay, yeah, then that would do it. Because that would be quite interesting if they had 3 teams in the top 5 from the SEC. I could see fans getting very nervous, getting closer to the end of the final 4 if they see Texas A&M like around 5,
Yep.
and they're going to think of putting 3 SEC teams in the playoffs. What that would do to the rest of the nation? They're going to go nuts. But hey, if you only lose 1 game to Alabama, you could end up making the playoffs. So that could be interesting.
That's when the playoff committee says, "Thank goodness for Clemson."
Yeah, well, it better be. Yes.
Or NC State, if it falls the way that you see it. Yes,
that's true. Yeah, but imagine. Yeah, just I can imagine some people going, "Oh, Texas A&M should be ahead of NC State because they lost to Alabama," but that's no way NC State wouldn't make it if they went undefeated and beat Clemson. Okay. All right. So odds wise, that's Texas A&M. I got 25 to 1 to win the national championship. That's a good number.
Yes.
For a 5th team, we mentioned Clemson 10 to 1, and then the favorites: Alabama 2 to 1, Ohio State 3 to 1, Georgia 4 to 1. So nothing there. NC State's 120 to 1.
There you go.
But that's to win the national championship. Getting to the playoffs is one thing. Winning the national championship is, believe it or not, completely different. And then Utah at 50 to 1. As my 5 team. So let's talk about sleepers first, then we'll get your party crasher. Sleeper. So and obviously we've mentioned these teams before. So based on the odds and what we've mentioned already, I'm going to put LSU in there at 90-1. I'm going to put Kansas State in there at 250-1, and I'll put Tennessee in there at 100-1. So besides NC State, those would be my other three sleepers to win the national championship for now. What about you? Who do you got for sleepers?
Well, I got to put Tennessee in there as well. And the fact of the matter is if they knock off Georgia and win the East, they would indeed be a recognized sleeper, and they could be that fifth team out of the SEC that ranks in the top five. I think there's a good chance that they're going to have a real big football season this year. Another real big sleeper that I've got is Fresno State. I think this football
Oh,
team, yes.
is that a party crasher too, or is that a different label?
Well, close to a party crasher, okay? Because
Okay.
the other team I'm going to give you as a party crasher could possibly be that sleeper, okay? But I got to mention, give their due to Fresno State. It's a football team I think is really keyed up and geared up for this football season here.
400-1.
There you go. What's wrong with that's what you call a sleeper, wouldn't you? You know.
Boise State is also 400-1.
There you go. Well, can you give me the entry of Boise State and Fresno State?
There you go. And Central Florida, by the way, is 300-1.
Oh wow. Wow.
And as far as some of the other sleepers, go ahead. What else were you saying?
Well, and my other sleeper is going to be UTSA, Texas San Antonio, because
Crazy man.
because I think this football team can run the table, and if they do happen to run the table this football season here, how can you look past a team that's
Texas.
Yes, yeah. To do that, they'd beat Texas, right? And that'd be a big bullet in their holster.
800-1.
800-1. Okay. Well, we'll try 800-1 with that football program.
Put a buck on that.
Right, because if they do knock off Texas, Katie bar the door, they won't lose another football game going out, and they could well be 2-0 going into the Texas football game as well, behind Jeff Traylor. So, that's the kind of if you win one game, you put yourself into a real attractive position to make a big haul. That's a kind of a score there that way.
And let's just take a look at some others. And look, I think really, I'm looking at the odds for the first time today, that you probably have to put Michigan there at 40-1, because if Michigan ends up beating Ohio State, then because I think offensively they're going to be better. They're not going to be better defensively, but they will be better offensively. The question is going to be at quarterback. Is McNamara, does he have another level? Meaning, can he open up the offense? Will they allow him to open up the offense? Will he be able to throw the ball downfield? Or if he doesn't, can J.J. McCarthy do that and open up the offense and become even more scary and dangerous? So because of that unknown, I think they're worth a gamble. It's worth a few bucks from my end at 40-1.
Well, they have to be a consideration play. I mean, doing everything that they did last football season, and feeling confident about what they did and coming back this year here as well. I'm again not a big Jim Harbaugh fan. I know he dispelled all of that last football season. Does he have 2 good years in a row for him? And again, using that same pet phrase, he'll be the hunted, not the hunter this football season. But at 40-1, I think for sure you have to put a buck or two on them.
And then you have Texas in the championship game of the Big 12. They're 50-1.
Yes.
Would you wager on them at 50-1?
Absolutely. If you win the Big 12, you have to make yourself a contender to make the college football playoff. That would all largely depend upon their record. If they're a one-loss team who wins the Big 12, there's a good chance they could indeed be in the college football playoff.
What about Miami? You have them as the runner-up in the ACC championship game. They're at 90-1.
I think you got to look at them as well. Mario Cristobal has done a great job with this program here, and they have a quarterback who, by the end of the year, might end up being the best quarterback in college football this year. So I think that warrants an opportunity.
We know who won't end up the best quarterback in college football this year, and that's Graham Mertz. But Wisconsin's 80-1, and you do have them in the championship game. So do you think Wisconsin can, do you think they could, at 80-1, because if Wisconsin plays in the championship game and only has one loss and beats Ohio State, they're probably in the playoffs.
Well, that last part of that sentence beats Ohio State.
Yeah.
I don't think it happens, and the only reason I had Wisconsin winning the West is because I don't think it's much of a battle in the West personally.
They do have a very good running game, though.
Yes,
very good.
Yes,
so
they do.
That's why they're going to be tough to beat. Let's see some others here that might open our eyes. Well, yeah, I won't bring them up. Cincinnati, by the way, 200 to 1. So,
well, you lose a 4-year starting quarterback who did something that no other team has done last year, a group of 5 making the playoffs. It makes it very, very difficult to repeat again, especially with a spotlight on them.
Notre Dame at 45 to 1.
Always a chance with Notre Dame. I just don't like the new coach situation here. And the fact that they don't reside in a conference, I think, hurts them when it comes to be pending or looking for that 4th team in the college football playoff.
The thing with Notre Dame is that because we saw the kid play last year, so we kind of know what he can do. But this is a different year. He's got more reps now as a starter. So if the kid can develop at quarterback, it could be that dimension that they've been missing to play with the big boys. Let's see. How about Oregon? Because they open up with Georgia. So if they upset Georgia, now all of a sudden that 90 to 1 line probably goes down to like 15 to 1 overnight.
It does, but you're still going to ask a team from the Pac-12 to make it to the college football.
Yeah, now they got to kind of still run the table. Do you think they could have one loss after Georgia and get there?
No.
So even if they beat Georgia, if they lose a game this season, let's say they lose to Oregon State last game of the season, but still win the division, win the Pac-12, they won't make it.
Well, that would be the excuse for them not to make it with the loss, because there's a good likelihood that there might not be there'll be another team that could fill their shoes that would be an undefeated football team.
Wow, that would be some talk, some discussion if that happened.
Yes, it would.
They beat Georgia. Baylor is at 100 to 1. I know you don't have them in the championship game. I do, so I'd probably put a couple bucks on Baylor.
The only reason I don't is the repeat factor there for Baylor, what they did. With Dave Aranda, and to come back and do it twice in a row. But I would say this, that the Big 12 looks to be down a little bit this year, so so why not at that price?
Ole Miss, 100 to 1.
That's scary, okay, because that's what Lane Kiffin is, a scary football coach, and can he win or lose but one game inside that salty?
As long as it's not Alabama.
I'm sorry?
As long as it's not Alabama.
Exactly. As long as it's not Alabama. So
yeah.
Consideration, yes. Remember, he did the best job of any team in the transfer portal. You can say Southern Cal, you can say Mississippi, but again, we'll repeat this in case people didn't catch it before, but the key to success for Lane Kiffin in the transfer portal, and he's the transfer portal king, is that the players that he brings in, he brought 14 of them in this year, he brings in players that were starters at other programs, not just disgruntled
backups. Players. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hey, I want to start.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that bodes well for Kiffin, and that's why he's as successful as he is right now.
And the other team that we kind of think is an interesting sleeper in the ACC is Florida State, but they're still a couple years away from being that type of team. They're 250 to 1. And then you got Kentucky's 120 to 1 and Florida's 90 to 1. Those are a couple of other teams besides Tennessee and South Carolina that are going to try to make it difficult for Georgia. But we love the job. I mean, I think the hiring, I think that the change at Florida. By the way, I'm going to have an interview today with Scott Carter, who works with the Florida Gators sports department. I will interview him today, so that'll be available on the channel. We'll find out, because they got an exciting young quarterback, this kid Richardson, but I might be asking too much year one.
I think it is asking too much year one. And, the other slant to all this is when you're talking about all these SEC teams that look to be attractive, they have to win this WrestleMania, if you will, coming out of the SEC.
Yep.
Unlike maybe somebody coming out of the ACC who all they have to basically do is get past Clemson, for argument's sake.
Yep.
So it's a little bit more difficult to find out who's going to be that WrestleMania champion.
Did you already say who the party crasher was?
No, I did not.
Okay, who's the party crasher?
My party crasher this year is going to be Brigham Young, BYU.
Ooh,
Yep.
okay. And why is that? Party crasher meaning that
Meaning
they're
that
going to be a playoff contender?
maybe a party crasher being not only a playoff contender, maybe they're the next Cincinnati to crash this party. Okay. I know they're an independent football team that doesn't bode well, but what they are is this. Number one, no back-to-back road games for this team. Every road game is spaced out with a home game or home games.
Okay.
They've won 21 games their last two football seasons. They've got 11 starters back on defense. They've got 8 starters back on offense. Very, very loaded football team. And to me, the whipped cream and the cherry on the ice cream sundae here is the fact that they are the number one team in all of college football with the most returning experience coming back this year. And I can say this, that since I've been following this, those are Bill Connelly's numbers from ESPN, and I've kept a record of all of his teams that he's had listed since he began it in 2016. Every team that's been the number one team has improved most dramatically the following football season. They have never taken a step backwards here. So if BYU does not take a step backwards from a 10-win season last year, that makes them perhaps arguably an 11-win football team this year. The key, obviously, is going to be, for them, the Notre Dame football game. If they can defeat Notre Dame in Vegas, where that Vegas site will be a big, big, huge edge for BYU in that contest because there'll be all BYU fans there. There'll be Notre Dame fans will buy there, a lot of them on tickets, but it's going to be largely a BYU football crowd supporting them in that football game. If they do that and they get by Oregon in week number 3, this football team could run the table and be that party crasher.
Yeah, as I said before, I mean, not only the thing about BYU for me is just their schedule because, I mean, look at this: Baylor, Oregon, you mentioned Notre Dame, they got Arkansas, they even have, and then they got at Boise, and they got at Stanford. We don't know how Stanford's going to be. They host East Carolina, and they host Utah State, two of your sleepers, and they go to South Florida to open the season. That is just and they go at Liberty. I mean, that's just a murderous schedule. I mean,
it is murderous, but you can only be a party crasher if you've done the unthinkable. Okay.
Sure. Yeah. No
And
question.
I think this team has the moxie, has the ability, has everything to do just that and say, where did they come from?
I'd love it. That'd be great.
Right, exactly.
250 to 1.
There you
for
go.
The national championship. And then I would never put any money on Heisman odds except for long shots because that's just a waste of time to put money on C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, at 2 or 3 to 1. Same thing, by the way, for national championships. Even though I picked Alabama to win the national championship. And by the way, I know we gave our rankings and stuff like that, but is that because you had Alabama number 1 like me? Does that mean that's your pick to win the championship?
It is my pick to win the championship because of the big chip on Nick Saban's shoulder for the way the season ended last year. And let me digress just a little bit here about the Heisman Trophy. I know we didn't get into it too deep because it can change. I mean, we're going to find 3 or 4 players are going to be the number 1 odds-on choice throughout the course during the season. But I read somewhere this football season here that the preseason Heisman Trophy favorite has not won the Heisman Trophy since 2009.
There you go.
There you go. Right. So
even Lamar Jackson, I remember Lamar Jackson was like 100 to 1 when the season began.
Yep. Wow.
So that's why I was saying it's a waste of your money to do any of the favorites. So you got to look at, especially quarterbacks. You got to look at more than likely quarterbacks that you think, like, hey, Hendon Hooker. If you think Tennessee can actually win the division and play in the SEC championship game, Hendon Hooker's 40 to 1. Devin Leary is 50 to 1. Cameron Rising is 60 to 1. Maybe, pick guys that if you think they're going to have a successful season team-wise, then maybe go with quarterback more than anything. And look, Bo Nix is 80 to 1.
Yeah, at Oregon. Go look at Cameron Rising, though. I mean, my goodness. he's got the supporting staff, and he's also enamored and won a lot of fans over last year. He would probably be, for me, a long shot choice.
Yeah, so that's go with the long shot. Go with something like that. I'd even tell you the truth. I'd even put a couple of bucks like on JJ McCarthy. Let's say he wins the job at Michigan. He's 90-1 to win the Heisman. And he's the reason Michigan is say upsetting Ohio State again and undefeated in the playoff. He's going to be one of the top Heisman guys. So try to think that way. Think of that kind of storyline situation. But again, you have to have the team nowadays. We're just not going to give the Heisman to a team that's 500 or has 4 or 5 losses. It's all about now. It's really just and it's kind of boring nowadays because it's almost like they give it away. I mean, it was nice that the wide receiver won it a couple of years ago, Devonta Smith. That was nice, but it's almost like you have to. It's like you have to. It's like a video game kind of award now. How many stats do you put up? Especially if you're a quarterback, do you put all this great quarterback stats up? Oh, if you're the best quarterback and you put up great stats and you're a good team, then you're going to win the Heisman. It's just I grew up thinking the Heisman was supposed to be about exciting players, not the best with the best teams. It was just, hey, an exciting player that does exciting things, But
Well, I'll end this on this about the Heisman possibilities. They're all attractive. They have to be healthy. They have to stay healthy. Obviously, they have to play, like you said, on a football team that puts up a lot of offense, wins football games, and not only to win the football games, but they have to then be very good defensively. And I think the choice that attracts me the most, as far as the long shot goes, out of all those Heisman names, would be Cameron Rising.
okay. And look, I know defensive players don't win it, but Will Anderson, 16-1. If a defensive player can win it, he can do it because he's on Alabama.
Correct.
And they've just won the award the last few years. And he's going to be in big games, and people are going to, hey, you know what? I could vote for the defensive guy, and I don't know if there's actually been like a true. I know what Charles Woodson won it, but he was also special teams and defensive back. So I'm not even sure if a Heisman winner's how long it's been, or if they've ever won a defensive player that only plays defense. I'm not sure if that's ever happened before. So, but voters like to be a part of new things. Hey, I voted the first guy in that was ever. So, Will Anderson at 16-1 is not a bad idea because he probably will be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft if the team that picks one does not need a quarterback. So, all right, Mark. So next week, like I said at the open of this show, we're going to be previewing the NFL season with Ryan Dunleavy. Hopefully everything works out well with Ryan and we can keep that scheduled date because things are going crazy in the last few weeks before the season kicks off when you're somebody that writes for papers like the New York Post. But hopefully we'll keep that schedule for next Wednesday to talk NFL. And then we will also kick off our picks and analysis for the first week 1, not week 0, but week 1 of the college football season. As we leave, do you want to leave us with one game to keep an eye on, one pick or something like that for Saturday?
Are you talking about for
week 0?
Week 0? Well, I'll give it to you from our Playbook Football newsletter. It was in our preseason guide. We wrote up every one of the week 0 games, and our upset special happens to be New Mexico State.
Oh, we talked about that.
Yes, we did. Right.
Yes.
Head coach Jerry Kill, Nevada being barefoot naked from what they were last year. I think you go as a double-digit road favorite. You're barefoot naked, and you got a head coach that's highly, deeply respected. I think that's all the makings for an upset.
All right, and that game it's at Nevada, or is it in New Mexico State? Where is that game?
It's at New Mexico State.
So it's a home game.
Yes, it is.
Okay, excellent, even better. So it's not like in Dubai or anything like that.
No, it's not in Dubai. No.
All right, yeah.
That's the World Cup. Okay.
Yeah, and Nebraska and Northwestern. That's in Dublin. So and that'll be Eastern time. The time zone it works out pretty well.
Yeah, it does. From a television standpoint, yes.
Yeah. All right, Mark. So next week we'll get to it. It'll be sort of like when we talk college football next week. That'll be the beginning of us talking college football every week. And then again, we'll preview the NFL next week as well. Appreciate it as always, Mark. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you before you know it.
Hey, my pleasure as always, Greg. Be well, stay safe, and I'll look forward to catching up with you next week.